Chapter 1: The Stifling Silence. The air in the neglected rear garden of the Kalin estate tasted like wet ash and the metallic tang of old neglect. Rin didn't move fast. He moved with the careful, practiced stillness of a shadow. He was tending a small, defiant cluster of purple roses, the only living color left in a world bleached of hope. Be small. Be silent. Be nothing they feel the need to crush. This was his core truth, the silent rule of survival he'd lived by because his voice had always been the thing that brought the most pain. He didn't hear the footsteps behind him, he felt the change in the atmosphere, the sudden weight of an unchallenged alpha's presence. Damon, the estate alpha's eldest son, smelled of cheap cologne and casual malice. Before he could move, Damon's heavy boot landed directly on the last blooming rosebud. A sickening, wet snap echoed in the stillness. Still playing with filth, little Omega? Damon's voice was smooth, a low vibration meant to control. Rin kept his gaze locked on the ruined petals. His chest tightened, but then his face remained a blank, empty canvas. He was withdrawn, seeking only the familiar comfort of silence and routine. He wants a reaction, Rin thought, don't give him one. This emotional flatline was his defense, his strength. Yet, Damon persisted. You really don't speak, do you? Damon ran a rough knuckle down Ren's cheek. The touch was a shocking violation. Ren's breath caught, and he pressed his lips together, sealing the words, the sound of his very existence, inside. He did this because he knew the moment he spoke, the game would shift from simple torment to something deeper, something far more dangerous. Such a waste. Damon sighed dramatically, the sound full of indulgent condescension, like a child bored with a broken toy. Well, enjoy your silence. You'll need it for the merchant they're selling you to. He didn't know what scared her more, the cruelty of Damon or the terrifying prospect of the marriage. Damon kicked a stray stone before swaggering away, his scent lingering like stale smoke. Rin waited, motionless, until the alpha's presence was completely gone. Only then did he allow his hand to shake. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the mangled bloom. His entire life had been about preparing for an inevitable, terrible future, and his upcoming marriage was the ultimate coin flip. The sight of a dusty, official carriage approaching the main gate shattered the moment. My executioner is early, he thought, and the carriage looks far too expensive for a mere merchant. Chapter 2: The Contract Arrives. The lawyer, a sharp-faced man whose expensive coat smelled of stale port and disdain, barely glanced at Rin. Instead, he was focused entirely on Lord Kalin, Ren's distant, disinterested guardian. Rin stood in the drafty drawing room. The air here was cold, heavy with the weight of old gold and bitter regret. His immediate goal was to secure the physical escape, regardless of the person. He needed to know the terms of his sentence. It's done, Lord Kalin announced, his voice booming as he slapped the parchment. The arrangement is simple. He's a wealthy commoner, a trade baron named Arden Thorn. He wants an Omega who won't be a bother. You, thankfully, fit that requirement perfectly. Rin internalized this, merchant baron. Commoner. This was the key to his mental stability. He rationalized the risk. Powerful alphas cared about bloodlines. A commoner cared about optics and airs. Rin could be a beautiful, silent fixture, safely ignored. This was his hope. Because of that, the cold, resigned terror of the unknown alpha was mixed with a flicker of desperate relief. Not only that, but the lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting a brass monocle, making the final process unnecessarily long. There is one rather unusual clause the Baron was quite firm on, Lord Kalin. It concerns the Omega's temperament. Temperament? He has none. Silent as a tomb. Kalin barked a bitter laugh. Precisely, the lawyer said with that sickening, oily smile. More importantly, the contract explicitly grants the Omega full protection against any demands for verbal interaction, under pain of a significant financial penalty. Most unusual, but the money is sound. Rin felt a silent, internal whiplash. A shield? The thought was profoundly disorienting. Alphas didn't give shields, they built cages. Deep down, he knew the truth: no powerful person gives a shield without demanding a sword in return. This wasn't protection, it was the setup for a cruel joke. Still, Kalin waved it away. Good. Fine. Get him out of here. The carriage is waiting. Without another word, Rin simply nodded, a small, almost invisible dip of his chin, accepting the terms and the immediate end of his life here. He had less than an hour. He turned, his only real mission now to retrieve his one true possession, the source of his quiet strength. Chapter 3: Farewell to Nothing. There was truly nothing to pack. Rin gathered his few worn clothes, placing them into the small satchel provided by the lawyer. Meanwhile, he reached beneath his threadbare pillow and pulled out his protective stone, a smooth, gray river stone. It was cool against his palm, his small, quiet anchor. He sat on the edge of his narrow bed, waiting. His heart was not pounding, it was ticking, cold and steady, like a time bomb counting down to an unknown explosion. His current goal was simply to survive the waiting, to control this fear until the merchant baron took possession. Just like that, a small, warm knock came at the door. It was the cook, Mrs. Hale, a woman whose kindness was as rare as gold in this house. She slid a bundled meal inside, and tucked under the cloth was a folded, handwritten note. Watch the merchant baron's boots. Rin stared at the paper. Why boots? The message was cryptic, unnerving. Because of that, he instantly felt a rush of adrenaline, the kind of fear that demanded action. He crushed the paper, but the message was already etched into his memory. As the silence stretched in the cold hall, Rin heard two servants gossiping softly, their voices carrying through the thin wall. They were talking about marriage. Did you see the Baron's guard? The man had the king's seal on his cloak pin, he was just hiding it with a bit of dirt. Nonsense. He's a merchant, paid in cash. They said so. A merchant, the first servant scoffed, who pays in platinum and has royal security escorting his lawyer. They say this manor has been purchased as a royal guest house for the Baron's business. The conversation faded, dismissed as wild speculation. But then, the words reverberated in Ren's small room. Royal guest house. King's seal. Ren's world tilted. His entire escape mechanism, built on the premise of low status and safe mediocrity, had been a devastating lie. The unusual contract, the boots, the royal whispers, it all coalesced. The Alpha was not merely wealthy, he was entangled with the very pinnacle of power. As the silence roared in his ears, Rin realized he wasn't escaping to a safe place, he was being led into the most gilded, most guarded cage in the kingdom. The high-stakes conflict just intensified because his fear of power was now directly proportional to the actual power of the man he was marrying. Now, the only way out was forward, into the gilded lie, to meet the unsettling alpha who had bought his silence. Chapter 4: The Unsettling Alpha. The carriage that arrived was not ostentatious, but the leather was soft, the springs silent, and the air inside smelled of clean cedar and subdued, expensive paper, not the harsh, unwashed scent of common travel. Ren sat stiffly, his back perfectly straight. As the wind shifted, his quiet terror mounted because this carriage was a new prison, far more refined than the old. The drive was short, ending not at a grand estate, but at a discreet, stone church. The ceremony was private. No guests. Just the officiant, a single, solemn witness, and them. Without thinking, Ren was led forward. He kept his eyes lowered, preparing his mental shield for the appearance of the merchant baron. He expected brusque indifference, perhaps a demanding, heavy scent of dominance. But then, he felt a hand close around his own. It was large, warm, and utterly gentle. Ren's head snapped up. The moment their eyes locked, Ren's carefully constructed world stuttered. Arden Thorn was not what Ren expected. He was alpha, yes, the power coiled in his broad shoulders and the commanding structure of his face was undeniable. Yet, his scent was not demanding, it was rich with sandalwood and rain, carefully subdued, almost respectful. And his eyes. They were a deep, intelligent hazel, filled with an unnerving gentleness that was entirely at odds with his power. "Hello, Ren." Arden's voice was low, a smooth baritone that didn't demand a response. It simply existed. Ren didn't move. He was instantly shocked and confused, his immediate goal dissolving into a fight-or-flight response. The alpha was kind. And that was 1,000 times more terrifying than cruelty, because cruelty was predictable. Kindness was manipulative. What does he want? Ren's mind screamed in the silence. The officiant began the short rite. Ren performed the necessary gestures, nodding, accepting the ring, plain gold, understated, never speaking. All the while, Arden's thumb lightly stroked the back of Ren's hand. It wasn't possessive, it was grounding. At that moment, as the vows concluded, Arden turned his full attention to Ren. His alpha power was palpable, a heavy blanket that Ren usually feared, but then Arden intentionally softened his scent, pulling his power inward, as if asking permission to breathe the same air. This immediate shift in the power dynamic disrupted Ren's trauma-based expectations. Instead of a husband, Ren felt he had gained an unnerving, hyper-perceptive guard. The silent carriage ride to the merchant manor that followed was the longest journey of Ren's life. Chapter 5: The Document of Autonomy. The merchant manor was misleading. It was large, built of warm, polished brick, and surrounded by sprawling, manicured gardens. It felt less like a merchant's home and more like a beautifully maintained royal guesthouse, confirming Ren's worst fears. Soon after their arrival, Ren was ushered into a sunlit sitting room. Arden closed the door softly. Ren immediately retreated internally, remaining utterly withdrawn and prepared for the inevitable demands. Arden didn't speak. He walked to a writing desk, picked up a large notepad, and moved slowly, deliberately, towards Ren. He sat down across from Ren and slid the pad across the table. The bold, clear script read, "Welcome, Ren. I am Arden. I know this is sudden and scary. Please, read this." What followed was the most astonishing thing Ren had ever seen. The next page was a handwritten legal document, titled, "Terms of Residence and Respect." It outlined Rin has access to the manor's entire grounds. Rin will never be forced to leave his rooms or attend functions. Ren's silence is to be fully respected by all staff. Any intimacy will proceed only in Ren's explicit, written direction. Rin felt his throat tighten. Autonomy? No demands? This was completely incompatible with his misbelief. Because of that, his mind began to race, frantically searching for the hidden clause, the manipulative angle. He scanned Arden's face, his eyes searching for the cold lie he knew must be there, yet all he saw was measured empathy and profound patience. As the silence stretched, Arden reached into his coat and placed a heavy, brass key, a master key to the manor, on the desk between them. He pointed at the contract, then to the key, then to Ren. He was offering him full physical agency. Ren took a deep, shaky breath. He had been taught that power always took. This power was offered. This was his decision point. He knew it was a risk, but the peace offered was an astonishing temptation. He made a conscious choice to accept the safety, deciding to cautiously trust the action of this man. Without another word, Ren slowly, deliberately, nodded once. He accepted the terms and the key. He would not trust the Alpha, but he would trust the contract. Chapter 6 Settling in. Ren chose the smallest, least adorned room upstairs. It wasn't grand, but it had a high window overlooking the garden, a space for quiet observation. His new immediate goal was to test the boundaries of this incredible, fragile piece. He sat by the window, waiting. He waited for the Alpha knock, the sudden demand, the broken promise. But then, the sound that came was not a knock, it was a soft, brief scratch at the door. Ren waited, watching the door handle. It turned slowly. Arden did not enter. Instead, he slid a tray through the door. The scent of hot chamomile and lavender filled the room. On the tray was a soft, expensive blanket. On a small note, Arden had written, "For your peace." No need to answer. Arden. As a result, Ren felt a strange, burning ache in his chest, a combination of disbelief and burgeoning hope. This deliberate respect, this regal patience, was something he'd never encountered. He respects the boundary, Ren thought, he truly respects the boundary. To make things worse for his misbelief, Ren looked at the blanket. It was heavy and smelled faintly of Arden's scent, but it wasn't a demand for a bond, it was a quiet comfort, a silent acknowledgement of his suffering. Ren eventually rose and picked up the tray. He realized he was locked into a new reality where kindness was the unexpected currency. This was a profound challenge to his internal flaw. He was not just safe physically, he was being protected emotionally. Which meant this gilded cage was less of a prison and more of a sanctuary. Ren wrapped the soft, heavy blanket around his shoulders. He felt the tension that had been locked in his muscles for years begin to slowly, cautiously, unwind. This fragile, astonishing piece was exactly what would lead him into a deeper, and ultimately more devastating, relationship with the king. Chapter 7 Manor Exploration. Come morning, the warm scent of Arden's subdued alpha pheromones was the only thing that kept the nightmares at bay. Ren woke cautiously. His first goal was to understand the topography of his new, strange cage, to find its weak spots, its exits, and its true purpose. The manor was large, yes, but then the luxury was subtle. The Persian rugs were faded in the centers, and the leather on the study chairs was cracked and worn from use. It wasn't the sterile, demanding perfection of nobility. It felt lived in, loved, and real. This deliberate lack of regalness was confusing. Why hide wealth? Rin wondered. Power likes to be seen. Meanwhile, the staff moved around him with astonishing deference. They brought meals to a small, bright dining nook, never the intimidating, long table. They never asked him questions. The cook, a kindly older beta, merely placed a small, savory tart before him and gave a soft, respectful nod before retreating. Because of that, Rin felt a growing, reluctant peace. He began his exploration. The house was full of books and maps, but few political documents. There was a faint, lingering scent of earth and pine, natural, not perfumed. Instead of a noble's trophy room, he found a comfortable library filled with works on history, ancient languages, and, curiously, gardening. What followed was Rin finding himself spending hours in the beautiful, quiet space. It was the first time in his life he felt safe enough to simply exist without shrinking. The atmosphere made him feel less like a prisoner and more like an unexpected, cherished guest. Still, the question remained, why did a powerful man go to such lengths to appear less powerful? The discovery of the library felt like a secret key, giving him access to Arden's internal world. Next, he knew he needed to see how Arden behaved when he wasn't alone. Chapter 8 Nonverbal Breakthrough. Rin was in the library again, utterly absorbed by a history of ancient architecture. Not only that, but he spotted a volume of medicinal herbs perched precariously on a high shelf. He was too short to reach it. He stretched, his fingers brushing the smooth spine, his physical strain noticeable only as a slight tension in his shoulders. As if summoned, Arden entered the library. He paused, his presence making the air suddenly warm, and his quiet scent of sandalwood filled the space. Arden saw Ren's predicament instantly. He didn't stride forward. He didn't point or gesture impatiently. Rather, he moved slowly, deliberately, to the far corner, retrieved a beautifully carved step stool, and placed it silently beside Rin. He paused for only a breath, meeting Ren's gaze with that intense, watchful look. Arden's eyes seemed to ask, "Is this acceptable?" Then, he simply left. Rin stood still. A wave of warm relief washed over him. This was not just kindness, this was keen emotional intelligence. Arden had seen a need, addressed it perfectly, and left no demand in return. He hadn't demanded words, demanded gratitude, or demanded contact. He had simply facilitated Ren's goal to reach the book. In that moment, Rin felt a genuine, non-sexual intimacy, a recognition that was more profound than any conversation could be. He stepped onto the stool and easily retrieved the book. This small success was a profound challenge to Ren's misbelief. Perhaps, Rin allowed himself to think, power doesn't always have to be a weapon. Between them, something cracked, the first, tiny fissure in his trauma-induced defense. But then, the sound of fast, sharp footsteps halted Ren's inner reflection. A nervous-looking man in a dark, clean uniform hurried into the library. "Baron, you must see this immediately, sir. It involves the capital." Arden's expression shifted, becoming instantly serious, his eyes now hard and focused. Arden looked immediately serious and preoccupied before excusing himself for a business meeting, leaving Rin alone with a chilling sense of unease. Chapter 9 The First Courtier. Rin tried to return to his book, but then the heavy scent of an unfamiliar alpha, stern, flowery, and overly formal, pulled him toward Arden's study door. This was not the scent of a merchant or a trade partner. It was the scent of the court. It was perfume over steel. With every heartbeat, Ren crept down the hall, his core strength sensing underlying tension. He paused near the study. He heard Arden's calm, measured voice, but then the other man's voice, smooth and utterly political, dominated the conversation. Baron Thorn, the rumors are escalating. You must attend the Queen Mother's reception, if only to stabilize the perception of His Majesty's current domestic arrangements. The Council is watching your Omega very closely. Ren froze. Council. Queen Mother. Stabilize perception. These were not merchant words. The tension broke when Ren heard the man say, in a hushed, conspiratorial tone, "The king expects discretion in this matter, and your continued absence is fueling Valerius's whispers." The king. The word hit Ren like a physical shove. Ren's breath caught again. The true scale of the lie momentarily stole his breath. Ren knew the king's personal court favored political maneuvering over emotion. Even so, Ren forced himself to reason. The merchant baron must be an intermediary, he thought, afraid to contemplate the true meaning. He handles the royal money, perhaps? That explains the security. He grasped for this rationalization because the alternative, that the kind, gentle man was the most feared alpha in the kingdom, was simply too terrifying to accept. As the truth unraveled, Ren heard Arden say, firmly, "The subject of my domestic arrangements is closed. Lord Valerius has no authority here. Ren is safe. That is all that matters." Arden's decisive loyalty gave Ren a strange jolt of confidence, even as the political world encroached. This was Ren's first true encounter with the encroaching political world, raising the stakes considerably. He claims my safety matters, Ren thought, but how long can he protect me from a king? Ren quietly retreated, knowing the illusion of the humble manor was crumbling, and a dangerous new reality was taking shape. Chapter 10: The Shared Vulnerability. Ren had been sleeping soundly for weeks, the quiet peace of the manor acting like a balm. But then, the past found him. That night, a mild nightmare, a sudden sent memory of Damon's hand, jolted Ren awake. He was shaking, the memory of absolute powerlessness clinging to his skin like ice water. His heart skipped a beat as he realized he was crying. He needed space, air. He slipped out of his room and found himself standing in the hallway. As the air thickened, a silent, primal part of him reached out, seeking the only safe, steady presence he knew. Just like that, Arden's door opened softly. He stood there, fully dressed, his alpha scent immediately softening to chamomile and moss, calm, grounding. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He saw the distress in Ren's eyes instantly. Instead of touching him, Arden moved slowly to the end of the hall and sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall, radiating patience. He simply waited. Ren's internal wall cracked. He sees the fear, and he won't use it. This was a profound difference. She felt it, clear as day, a silent invitation, not a command. Ren's goal was to seek comfort despite the risk, and he was driven by affection and a need to validate his safety. He crossed the distance, 3 terrifying steps, and slid down to sit beside Arden. He didn't lean on him, not quite. He leaned against the wall next to him, allowing their shoulders to brush. In the quiet that followed, Arden's large hand came up and, with infinite slowness, covered Ren's trembling hand. He squeezed once, gently. That's why Ren didn't pull away. This physical closeness was a major emotional risk, because it meant he was actively choosing to trust the man, risking everything he believed about power. Rin closed his eyes, accepting the grounding warmth. A beat later, he realized he was genuinely falling in love with this kind man, the man who respected his silence more than his own title. The next morning, Rin looked at his reflection, tracing the outline of his mouth. He wondered, with a frightening mixture of hope and fear, what his voice would sound like saying Arden's name. Chapter 11: The Rumor. The following afternoon, Rin was shopping in the discreet, quiet market district Arden preferred, escorted only by a single, unobtrusive beta guard. Rin liked this market, it felt normal, away from the court's shadows. But then, near a spice stall, Rin overheard two vendors speaking in low, sharp whispers. They were talking about the sudden, intense court scrutiny aimed at Merchant Thorn. "He's been too quiet," the first vendor hissed. "They say Lord Valerius is furious, Thorn is disrupting the king's plans. He's far too close to the crown's inner circle." The second vendor snorted. "He's just a merchant. They say he married that poor, silent Omega to secure a truce with some minor, unstable house, to save the crown some trouble, they say." Disbelief rapidly turned to cold, familiar dread. Ren's heart pounded. Save the crown some trouble. The words perfectly validated his deepest fear. He was not a partner, he was a political convenience, a temporary solution. His panic alarm went off, loud and deafening inside his head. This was the midpoint shift. The safety of the manor was compromised. The fact that the truth of the contract's convenience was being whispered publicly directly challenged his belief in Arden's selfless love. As the truth unraveled, Rin realized the stakes weren't just about his safety anymore, they were about the painful destruction of the first genuine affection he'd ever known. When her name left his lips, when Rin heard the vendor repeat the rumor about the silent Omega, he wanted to run. Instead, he forced himself to buy a small bouquet of bluebells, masking his fear. He looked up the street. There, near a side alley, he saw Arden. The king was arguing intensely with a nervous-looking man, a man whose clothes shouted official business. The intensity in Arden's eyes was greater, harder, and colder than Rin had ever seen. Chapter 12: Arden's Plan. Rin hurried back to the manor, the bluebells feeling heavy and ridiculous in his hand. He retreated to the library, the only place he felt he could think. He sat tucked away in the corner, his mind swimming in rumors and fear. Meanwhile, Rin heard the study door open and close. He recognized the footsteps immediately. Arden entered the library, looking stressed, but then a strange euphoria seemed to brighten his face. He was holding a heavy, sealed, official-looking document, the one he was arguing about outside. He didn't know what scared her more, the rumors or the sudden, blinding joy on Arden's face. Rin interpreted the euphoria as the excitement over his scheme. Arden didn't see Rin in the corner. He walked quickly to his desk and began writing feverishly on a new sheet of parchment, an elaborate dinner invitation. He was clearly preparing to make a grand gesture. He looked up, his eyes shining brightly, and addressed the empty room, his voice soft, "It's time. I can't live another day as a lie." Because of that confession, Rin flinched subtly when Arden, finally seeing him, approached with the sealed invitation. Arden smiled, a raw, genuine expression, and held out the invitation before sealing it with a drop of crimson wax. "Tomorrow night," Arden mouthed silently, his eyes holding a promise. "I will tell you everything." Rin could only meet his gaze with quiet dread. He knew Arden was ready to reveal the truth, but then Ren, poisoned by suspicion, believed the dinner would be his unveiling as a political asset. He interpreted Arden's gesture as a demand for a performance. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the heat of fear and betrayal, Ren offered a tiny, almost invisible shake of his head. He subtly rejected the invitation for a grand, public confession. His goal was to delay the inevitable confrontation, to buy time to understand how deep the deception went. Arden looked confused, a flicker of pain crossing his face, but he respected the refusal. He simply nodded, placed the invitation on the desk, and left. The air thickened with unspoken words. Ren was now committed to finding the truth on his own terms. Next, he would have to find a way to break Arden's facade before the facade broke Ren. Chapter 13: The Engagement Gift. Ren avoided Arden all morning. The air in the manor was thick with their unspoken conflict, Arden's desire to confess, and Ren's desperate need to stall. Ren's mind felt like a constantly ticking clock. His goal was to finally commit to a path and demand the truth, regardless of the cost to his safety. Suddenly, Arden appeared at Ren's door. He wasn't holding an invitation this time. He was holding a small, velvet box. Arden entered and sat down quietly, setting the box between them. He opened it slowly. Inside rested a beautifully crafted, ornate silver pen and a small, blank leather-bound journal. The pen was not plain. In fact, it was engraved with a subtle, unmistakable symbol, a single, stylized crown, hidden beneath the swirling floral patterns. Arden gently pushed the journal toward Ren. He gestured to the pen, then to the blank page. "Use it," his hazel eyes pleaded. "Speak to me." Ren felt a rush of cold dread. He didn't see a romantic gift. He saw the pen not as a romantic gift, but as Arden finally demanding his voice for a public role. The single crown engraving was the truth he'd been fighting against. "He wants me to write my acceptance of the lie." Because of that fear, Ren instantly committed. He would use the pen, but not for the king's purpose. He decided this was his chance. He would use the silver pen to write the only question that mattered: who are you, really? But then, before Ren could pick up the pen, a junior servant, not one of the usual manor staff, but one wearing the hurried, tense scent of the political sphere, burst into the room. The Baron must come immediately. Lord Valerius has called an emergency council meeting about the unstable domestic situation. Arden's face went instantly rigid, the king surfacing over the man. He glanced at the pen and journal, his gaze settling on Ren, full of conflict. The air thickened with the scent of his regret. He rushed out. The tension broke only when the door clicked shut. Chapter 14: Failed Communication. Ren was left alone, holding the incriminating pen. Frustration and mounting terror flooded him. The delay felt deliberate, as if the king were stalling his confession until the stage was perfectly set. He didn't know what scared her more, the urgent summons or the fact that Arden had been so easily pulled back into the royal sphere. Ren grabbed the journal and the silver pen and rushed to Arden's study, determined to wait. Arden was already gone. Instead, Ren found only a hastily written note left on the desk: "Urgent business, forgive me. The dinner is tomorrow night. Wait for me." As a result, Ren's choice to confront was violently postponed. He was left alone in the room with the symbols of Arden's secrets, a pile of official-looking documents Arden had failed to hide. Ren realized he had to act now. He didn't want to break the man's trust, but then the man had already broken his. Ren, his movements cautious and precise, began to examine the papers. Official seals. Unusual security codes. And a cryptic ledger detailing massive financial transfers, not merchant deals, but crown disbursements. He found a floor plan of the manor labeled Emergency Royal Residence, Level 3 Security. With every heartbeat, Ren's suspicion was confirmed. He was a piece of royal property, housed in a highly secure location. The stakes were now personal and immediate. He decided he wouldn't just wait up, he would find out what was happening tonight. He felt it, clear as day, a renewed, desperate resolve. He had to hear the truth from the antagonist, Valerius, to prepare himself for the inevitable public betrayal. Next, he would find the true chamber of the king. Chapter 15, The Overheard Truth, The Betrayal. It was late. Ren was hiding in the servants' passage downstairs. The only light came from the rarely used parlor. He knew someone was inside because he could hear the low murmur of powerful voices and smell the distinct, sharp, cynical scent of Lord Valerius. Without warning, Ren crept to the door, pressing his ear to the wood. Valerius's voice was slick, triumphant. Your Majesty, the annulment is the clean solution. You married him under duress, and everyone knows the truth. Ren flinched. Your Majesty. He is the perfect solution, Your Majesty, Valerius continued, his voice dripping with indulgent condescension. The Silent One is perfect, unconnected, easy to control, a temporary solution to secure the royal lineage. Ren's heart skipped. He searched the air for Arden's scent, Arden's defense, Arden's kindness. He didn't hear Arden's voice. He only heard Valerius's crushing conclusion. No one will challenge an Omega who can't even speak. It was a brilliant, if desperate, maneuver. The king's experiment. Utter, immediate devastation. Ren's mind didn't process the words, it processed the fact that his misbelief was brutally confirmed. The kindness, the contract, the autonomy, it was all a calculated lie. He wasn't loved, he was a convenient tool, chosen for his weakness. Just like that, everything changed. As the silence roared in his ears, Ren dropped the silver pen. He didn't care about the sound. The love he had tentatively nurtured was a political weapon used to secure a throne. The man he loved was the king, the embodiment of the power he feared most. Her world tilted. He couldn't stay here. He felt the cold, familiar panic of betrayal overwhelming him. Ren collapsed into a state of severe trauma, unable to speak or write his distress. He turned and fled the manor, seeking the only refuge he had ever known, absolute, isolating silence. His original act of deception became the crushing proof of betrayal, and the point of no return had been crossed. Chapter 16, The Shattering. Ren didn't run. He simply fled. He burst out of the servants' entrance of the manor, the heavy, humid air of the night hitting him like a physical slap. The king's security was everywhere, but then Ren knew the hidden paths, the shadows, the silence, the skills of the ignored. He stumbled down the muddy slope behind the kitchen. His goal was immediate, escape. He viewed Arden Thorn, no, King Arden, as his most dangerous captor yet. A kind captor is the worst kind, his trauma-ridden mind screamed, because you trust the hand that locks the door. What followed was a dizzying rush of self-hatred. How could you be so stupid? He had allowed affection, a genuine, terrifying connection, to blossom, because he believed the lie of the merchant baron. That lie had now become the crushing proof of his most fundamental misbelief: love, power, and intimacy are tools for control and pain. He reached the main road and hid behind a cluster of dark, thick hedges. He felt the cold shock of despair beginning. He reached for his silver pen, the pen Arden had given him, but then the sight of the tiny crown engraving sent a jolt of pure nausea through him. He violently swept it to the ground, the clatter on the cobblestones reinforcing the chaos in his mind. The silver object, a tool of the crown, was nothing but a symbol of his gilded cage. As the echo faded, Rin didn't look back at the warm lights of the guest house. He knew the contract, the kindness, the love, it was all a cage, just a more gilded one. Next, he had to disappear completely into the vast, indifferent city. Chapter 17: The Flight. The capital city was a shock to Ren's senses. It was loud, rank, and aggressively alive. The vast, alien capital city swallowed him whole. Ren had spent his life in isolated silence, but then the noise was a constant, physical assault. He kept his head down, using his keen emotional intelligence to navigate the crowds, sensing aggression, fear, and boredom without meeting anyone's eyes. He didn't know where he was going. He was driven by instinct, his goal to find immediate, anonymous hiding. He saw the true palace in the distance, a monstrous, towering, gold-lit fortress that confirmed the terrifying scale of Arden's lie. He is the king, Ren thought, the alpha of all alphas. In that moment, he burned with self-hatred. He felt defeated. He had traded one small prison for the very center of power. To make things worse, his silence, his lifelong defense, had become a barrier to survival. He couldn't ask for help. He couldn't explain. He was utterly, dangerously isolated. He didn't know what scared her more, the thought of being caught by Arden's royal guards, or the thought of what Arden would say when he finally found him. Would he rage? Would he simply apologize and then lock Ren away for good, protecting his experiment? He felt it, clear as day, a profound, gut-wrenching loneliness. He crept into a narrow, filthy alleyway behind a row of abandoned market stalls. The stench of decay was heavy, but then it was better than the smell of sandalwood and lies. He finally stopped running, collapsing into the shadows. Chapter 18: Dark Night of the Soul. As dawn breaks, the low light filtering into the alleyway showed his surroundings: discarded crates, spoiled food, and old, torn papers. Ren found an old, crumpled newspaper. The headline screamed, "The Crown's disgraced Omega vanishes." Ren picked it up with a trembling hand. There, on the front page, was a terrible, unflattering sketch of him. The article, clearly sourced from a court faction, hinted at Ren's unstable mental state and his unsuitability for royal duties. The final sentence, attributed to an anonymous, trusted royal source, Valerius, suggested the king's marriage was already under review for annulment due to the Omega's fragility. The antagonist had capitalized immediately. Ren sank back against the cold, damp stone. This was the all-is-lost moment. He was now publicly branded as fragile, unstable, and unworthy. His silence, his coping mechanism, had been used against him publicly, validating Valerius's words that he was an Omega who couldn't even speak. The fear has won. Ren resigned. His goal had evaporated into total surrender. He had confronted his deepest flaw, the desperate desire for a safety that could not exist in a world ruled by power, because power always betrayed. He closed his eyes. As the bond pulsed, a phantom ache in his chest connecting him to Arden, he pushed it down. He would wait here, in the cold, until capture came. He knew the king would find him eventually, but he had to find a way to break free from his own despair first. Chapter 19 The Sympathetic Eye. Ren was huddled in the alley, the scent of garbage and hopelessness his only comfort. He was waiting. He felt it, clear as day, he was waiting for the king's guards to find their lost property. But then, a shadow fell over him that smelled familiar. It was soft, comforting, and carried the faint scent of warm tea and cinnamon, the scent of the junior scullery maid from the manor. She was small, quiet, and had always been kind to Ren, respecting his silence without being asked. She didn't speak. She didn't look down on him. Instead, she placed a small, clean water skin next to him and, with a quick, nervous glance around, pressed a crumpled piece of paper into his hand. As if fate demanded it, she gave Ren a tiny, conspiratorial nod, then vanished back into the chaos of the city. Ren looked at the note. It was not signed. The handwriting was Arden's, rushed and ragged. It looked like something he'd tossed away in frustration. It read, "I cannot let them do this. I cannot choose the crown over my integrity. Valerius is moving too fast, and I have failed to protect you. My fear of being betrayed by someone who loved the man, not the king, is why I kept the secret. Please, Ren, please let me find you. I need you to know the truth. The lie was for my protection, not yours." The moment their eyes locked, though she was gone, Ren's perception of the betrayal violently shifted. He had based his flight on Valerius's sneering lie, the king's experiment. Now, he was reading Arden's raw, emotional confession, a parallel fear of his own status being used against him. He feared betrayal too, Ren realized, by someone who loved the man. Because of that, Ren's internal wall didn't just crack, it crumbled. He used his keen emotional intelligence to recognize the genuineness of Arden's fear, a mirror to his own. A single tear slid down Ren's cheek, the first since the night he ran. He was no longer running from a monster, he was running from a terrified, powerful man who had made a terrible mistake. Chapter 20 Connecting the Dots. With every heartbeat, Ren felt the surge of renewed hope and determination. His goal was no longer survival, it was certainty. He needed to know which voice was the truth, the manipulative courtier or the heartbroken alpha. He pulled out the journal and the silver pen, the pen he had thrown down but the maid had clearly retrieved. He used the pen, the symbol of the crown, to write for the first time in years. Valerius. Politics. Pressure. He wrote the words simply, connecting the dots. He connected the strange contract, the courtier's whispers, and Valerius's public maneuvering. He understood the lie wasn't to control him, it was to protect Arden from the political scrutiny that would destroy an Omega who married a king without proper vetting. The annulment was the antagonist's move, not Arden's. As the bond pulsed, no longer in pain, but in recognition, Ren made a final, desperate plan, to return to the palace and confront the deceit with his presence. He was choosing to trust the man, not the title. This was his true transformation. Instead of fleeing the power, Ren was now preparing to challenge it directly. He was no longer silent out of fear, he was silent out of resolve. Next, he had to look the part of a king's Omega, even if it was for only one final, defining moment. Chapter 21 The Approach. Ren spent the next hour meticulously cleaning himself up using the water the maid provided. He put on his best, albeit modest, clothing from the manor, a rich, deep blue tunic that enhanced the color of his eyes. He gathered his courage. Without thinking, he walked out of the alley and toward the towering palace gates. As the sky darkened, the palace, usually a symbol of suffocating power, now felt like a stage. He approached the imposing, armored guards. They were rigid, intimidating alphas, clearly expecting a battle. Ren did not speak. He did not flinch. Rather, he walked with an innate grace and regal presence that his old life had never allowed him to show. His chin was high. He met the eyes of the highest-ranking officer, a nervous-looking junior alpha. With a single glance, he commanded their attention. He stopped before the gate, pulled out a small piece of paper from the journal, and wrote 2 words, "The King." He handed the note to the stunned junior officer. The officer stammered, unsure of how to proceed with the beautiful, silent Omega who smelled faintly of sandalwood and steel resolve. As if pulled by a string, the officer finally, reluctantly, ushered Ren through the gates. He was actively using his power, presence, to navigate the world of power. Ren had successfully crossed the final barrier. Now, he would walk straight into the council chamber and face the king and the antagonist. Chapter 22, The Climax. The palace guard escorted Ren not to a parlor, but directly to the large, intimidating council chamber. Ren's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. As if the forest watched, he entered the room. The air was thick with the scent of authority, old paper, and Valerius's sharp, victorious alpha scent. Ren scanned the room, a semicircle of stern, judging council members. But then, his gaze locked onto the center table. Arden was there. He was haggard, defeated, his shoulders slumped, and his kingly sense subdued by exhaustion. He was staring down at a heavy parchment, the annulment papers. Lord Valerius stood over him, holding a golden quill. "And with your signature, your majesty," Valerius was pressing, his voice smooth and utterly cold, "the political folly of the silent Omega is resolved. The crown secures its stability." Arden didn't move. He looked broken. Without thinking, Ren began to walk. He ignored Valerius, whose face twisted into a snarl of shock. He ignored the gasps of the council. Ren walked straight across the polished marble floor, his eyes fixed on the man he loved, the man who was also the king. Ren stopped right at Arden's side. Arden looked up, his hazel eyes wide with disbelief and shock. As the silence roared in the massive chamber, Ren reached out. He took the annulment papers from the table, his fingers brushing against Arden's. Ren met Lord Valerius's sneering, cruel eyes, and slowly, deliberately, he tore the official, gold-sealed document clean in half. Snap! The sound was loud, final, and irreversible. This was Ren's climax. This was his goal, to choose Arden publicly and decisively, despite his fear. His silence, once a shield of weakness, was now a powerful, unassailable statement of strength. In that moment, he defeated Valerius's plan, destroying the lie with a single act. Arden surged to his feet, a low, rumbling growl rising in his chest, a mix of alpha dominance and sheer, overwhelming relief. Chapter 23, Falling Action. Lord Valerius, Arden's voice was suddenly deep, commanding, and filled with a terrifying, contained alpha fury. "You have exceeded your authority. Leave the room. All of you." Now. The council scrambled away. Valerius gave Ren one last look of utter hatred, but then he obeyed the king's absolute command. They were alone. Arden looked at the torn papers, then at Ren, his own composure dissolving. The Alpha King dissolved into the man Ren knew at the manor. He didn't rush to touch Ren. Instead, he reached into his coat and silently held out the original marriage contract to Ren, the one protecting his silence. It was a symbol of his initial good intentions. Ren took the contract. He walked to the vast stone fireplace where a low fire was burning. He crumpled the paper and threw it into the flames. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, the paper vanished. Ren was destroying the need for the lie. Next, Ren pulled out the silver pen, the pen Arden had given him, the pen Ren had feared, and opened the small, leather-bound journal. He wrote a single word, his hand steady, "Why?" He showed it to Arden. Arden took Ren's free hand and brought it to his lips, kissing his fingers gently. His voice was thick with emotion, rough and true. "Because I am the king, Ren, and I live surrounded by lies. I needed to find someone who saw me, the man, not the crown. I needed to know the love was real. Because of that, I used the merchant's lie to buy us time, to buy us safety. I broke your trust. I know." Arden's eyes were filled with pain. He was furious, not at Ren, but at his own weakness. "I was afraid to tell you the truth, because I was afraid you would run away from the power. I was afraid to be alone." Chapter 24, Resolution. Ren took the pen back. He wrote swiftly, filling the page with his words for the first time. "I ran from the lie, not the power. I ran when I thought I was only a convenience. You are safe with me. But, will you let me speak now? Or am I still the silent one?" Arden read the words, and a profound, beautiful smile spread across his face. The moment their eyes locked, the tension completely vanished. "You are free, Ren. You are the king's consort. The silent one was a political convenience. You, Ren, are my home." Ren didn't need the pen anymore. The truth was burning in his chest. Her voice trembled as she fought the barrier, the fear of the sound. He looked at Arden, the gentle alpha who had respected his silence, and finally, he found his courage. He whispered, his voice thin and unused, "Ar. Arden." Arden's scent flared with joy. He swept Ren into his arms, holding him close. He was pulled by a string toward the man who had faced down the council for him. "You said my name," Arden whispered into Ren's hair, tears finally mixing with the scent of sandalwood. "My beautiful, brave Omega. You are loved. You are the heart of this kingdom now." Ren had found his voice in choosing love over fear. He returned the embrace, feeling the solid, real presence of his king and his man. Just like that, Ren's world was set right. They had achieved an earned and complete happy ending, their bond forged in betrayal, tested by power, and saved by a singular, powerful act of silent, enduring love.